The sun over Monaco didn't just shine, it seemed to gild everything it touched. The water of the harbor was a deep, impossible turquoise, bobbing with vessels that cost more than the GDP of small island nations. I stood on the dock, adjusting the strap of my canvas duffel bag. It was old, frayed at the edges, and sharply contrasted with the pristine white walkway. I wore a simple gray t-shirt and faded jeans, my dark auburn hair parted to the side, perhaps a little too long for the corporate world's liking. To the casual observer, I was Conrad Kerrigan, the wayward nephew, the drifter who had spent the last decade vanishing off the map while the rest of the family climbed social ladders. To my father, Thomas, I was simply a son who had finally come home. I saw him standing near the gangway of the Gilded Lily, a super yacht that looked more like a floating palace than a boat. Dad looked small against the hull. He was wearing a suit that was clearly off the rack, a bit tight in the shoulders, the fabric synthetic and shiny under the Mediterranean sun. He was wringing his hands, a nervous tic he'd had since Mom passed. Today was supposed to be his day, his retirement party after 40 years of dutiful, quiet service as a junior accountant for the family firm. But looking at his posture, the slump of his shoulders, I knew this wasn't a celebration. It was a summons. I walked up to him, my boots making a dull thud on the wood compared to the sharp click-clack of high heels passing us. "Dad?" I said softly, resting a hand on his shoulder. He jumped, then turned, his eyes widening. "Conrad, you made it!" The relief in his voice broke my heart. He hugged me, holding on tight. He smelled of Old Spice and anxiety. "I didn't think you could afford the flight," he whispered, trying to be discreet. "I scraped it together," I lied smoothly. I didn't tell him I had flown in on a C-130 to a nearby base and then caught a private hop. To him, I was just Conrad, the guy who couldn't hold down a job. "I wouldn't miss this. You earned this retirement." "Earned it? Oh, Thomas, don't be so dramatic." The voice cut through the salt air like a serrated knife. We both turned to see Aunt Petunia descending the gangway. She was a vision of aggressive wealth. Her dress was a screaming shade of fuchsia, draped in enough gold jewelry to anchor a dinghy. She held a champagne flute as if it were a scepter. She looked at my father with pity, then at me with undisguised disgust. Her eyes scanned my faded jeans and my worn bag. "And look who the cat dragged in from the gutter," she sneered, taking a sip of her drink. "Conrad, I see you're still finding yourself."
"Hello, Aunt Petunia," I said, keeping my voice even. My hands remained relaxed at my sides. I had faced warlords and insurgents who projected more genuine menace than this woman, yet her ability to dismantle my father's confidence was a threat I took seriously. "You look lovely," she scoffed. "Flattery won't get you a handout, boy. I told Thomas he could invite family, but I assumed he had the good sense to invite the successful ones, not the ones who look like they sleep under bridges." She turned to my father, ignoring me completely now. "Thomas, the guests are arriving. Try not to look so stiff. It embarrasses the firm. You're retiring, not facing a firing squad. Though with your pension performance, perhaps there isn't much difference." My father forced a smile, his face reddening. "Right, Petunia. Sorry, I'm just happy Conrad is here." Petunia rolled her eyes. "Yes, well, make sure he stays out of the VIP area. I have investors coming aboard. I don't want them thinking we're running a soup kitchen." She turned on her heel and marched back up the ramp. I felt a surge of cold anger, not for the insult to me, but for the way my father shrank. He looked at me apologetically. "She's under a lot of stress. The merger," he mumbled. "It's okay, Dad," I said, offering him a reassuring smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes. "Let's go celebrate you." The deck of the yacht was a sensory overload of opulence. Waiters in white tuxedos moved like ghosts through the crowd, carrying trays of caviar and crystal flutes. The guests were a collection of Monaco's elite and the hangers-on who were desperate to be them. They spoke in hushed tones about stocks, acquisitions, and summer homes in the Hamptons. My father and I stood near the railing, as far from the center as possible. Dad held a beer, the only one available as the champagne was reserved for the premium guests, and looked out at the water. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, trying to find some joy in the moment. "I never thought I'd be on a boat like this." I nodded, leaning against the polished teak railing. "It is, Dad. You deserve a view like this every day." He laughed, a dry, brutal sound. "On my pension, I'll be lucky to afford a view of the parking lot at the nursing home. But it's okay. I'm just glad I'm done. 40 years, Conrad. 40 years of numbers." I watched him closely. There was a shadow in his eyes, something heavier than just retirement jitters. "Is everything okay with the pension, Dad?" I asked casually. He stiffened. It's complicated. Petunia says the fund took a hit. She's handling it." The way he said handling it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. In my line of work, the work I couldn't talk about, intuition was a survival mechanism. And right now, every alarm bell was ringing. Petunia wasn't just a rude relative, she was a predator. Just then, the music lowered. A spotlight hit the center of the upper deck. Petunia stood there with the microphone, beaming with a shark-like grin. "Attention, everyone," she boomed. "If we could take a moment from our fabulous evening to acknowledge the reason for this quaint little gathering." She gestured vaguely towards the shadows where we stood. "My brother-in-law, Thomas, is finally stepping down. Come up here, Thomas. Don't be shy." My father hesitated, looking at me with panic. "Go on, Dad," I whispered. "Head high." He straightened his cheap suit jacket and walked slowly toward the light. The crowd offered a smattering of polite, indifferent applause. He climbed the short stairs to the stage, looking like a deer caught in headlights next to Petunia's vibrant fuchsia presence. She wrapped a patronizing arm around his shoulder. 40 years, she announced, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Thomas has been the backbone of our back office, always there, quietly punching the numbers, never complaining, never ambitious." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It was a subtle dig, painting him as a plotter, a drone. Dad kept his smile fixed, but I saw his hands trembling. "And now," Petunia continued, "he heads off into the sunset. But as family, we know that retirement can be expensive, especially when one hasn't exactly been a shark in the market, right, Thomas?" She laughed again, and the crowd joined in more heartily this time. I clenched my jaw. My dark brown eyes, usually warm, hardened as I fixed them on her. I moved slightly closer, stepping out of the shadows. "However," Petunia said, her tone shifting to something sharper, "we have a little surprise for Thomas, a going-away present, because family takes care of family, even the less capable ones." She signaled to a waiter who brought forward a large envelope. It wasn't a gift box. It was a document folder. Dad looked confused. He reached for it, but Petunia pulled it back slightly. "Before you open it, Thomas, I want to share a little story. A story about Grandma Rose." The air on the deck changed. The mention of my grandmother, who was currently in an assisted living facility that cost a fortune, froze my father. "What about Mom?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the microphone feedback. "Well," Petunia sighed theatrically into the mic, "the facility called. Apparently the payments are 6 months behind, and since the account was linked to your, let's call it, modest equity, they are evicting her tomorrow morning." A gasp went through the crowd, not of sympathy, but of scandal. Poverty was the ultimate sin in this circle. My father looked as if he had been punched in the gut. "No," he stammered. "No, that's impossible. The pension, the automatic deductions." Petunia tutted, shaking her head. "Oh, Thomas, you really didn't read the restructuring emails, did you?
The pension fund was frozen for reallocation 6 months ago. You've been insolvent since Christmas." She said it casually, as if discussing the weather. I felt a cold calm wash over me. This was calculated. She had let him run dry, let the debt pile up, just to expose him here, now. "But she can't be evicted," Dad pleaded, forgetting the crowd, forgetting his dignity. "She's 90. She has dementia. Petunia, you control the trust. You can stop this." "I could," Petunia smiled, the trap springing shut. "But the trust is for active family members, contributors, and you are retiring. You are effectively a drain." She held up the envelope again. "However, I am a benevolent woman. Inside this envelope is a contract, an agreement, if you will. You can continue to work for the firm. We have an opening for a facilities manager at the warehouse."
"A janitor?" someone in the crowd whispered loudly. "It pays minimum wage," Petunia said brightly, "but it comes with a benefit. I will personally cover Grandma Rose's housing for another year. All you have to do is sign, admit that you need my charity, renounce your pension claim, which is worthless anyway, and get back to work. Scrubbing floors is honorable work, Thomas, better than being a deadbeat." The humiliation was absolute. She was asking him to trade his 40 years of service and his retirement for a mop, just to keep his mother off the street, and she was doing it in front of the people he had spent his life serving. My father stood there, the document in his shaking hands. He looked at the crowd, then at the pen she offered. He looked defeated, broken. I stepped forward. The movement was fluid, silent. I didn't push through the crowd. I simply moved through the gaps, a ghost in the machine. "Aunt Petunia," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. It was the voice I used when negotiating with village elders in hostile territory, calm, respectful, but underpinned by steel. She looked down from the stage, squinting. "Oh, look, the drifter speaks. Go sit down, Conrad. The adults are talking business." "This isn't business," I said, walking to the base of the stairs. "This is extortion. You embezzled the pension fund, didn't you? That's why it was frozen. And now you need him to sign a waiver renouncing his claim so you don't go to prison when the audit happens." The silence on the boat was deafening. Petunia's face went from smug to purple in a second. "How dare you?" she shrieked. "Security, get this bum off my boat." "It's a simple deduction," I continued, looking at my father. "Dad, don't sign it." "Conrad," Dad whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I have to, for Grandma. I can't let her be homeless." He uncapped the pen. The desperation in his eyes was the most painful thing I had ever seen. He was willing to be a slave to this woman to save his mother. 2 large security guards in black suits began to move toward me. They were big, hired muscle, used to bullying drunks and paparazzi. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on my father. "Dad, listen to me. Grandma isn't going anywhere. I promise you." "You promise?" Petunia cackled, a harsh, grating sound. "With what money? Your panhandling earnings? You're a loser, Conrad. A ghost. You disappeared for 10 years because you couldn't handle the real world, and now you come back to lecture me?" She turned to the guards. "Throw him overboard. I mean it. Toss him in the harbor." The first guard reached for my shoulder. It was a mistake. I didn't strike him. I didn't break his arm. I simply shifted my weight, intercepted his wrist, and applied a precise amount of pressure to a nerve cluster. His knees buckled, and he gasped, dropping to one knee. I held him there, gently, but immovably. The second guard hesitated, seeing his partner neutralized without a punch being thrown. "I asked you to stop," I said to Petunia, my voice dropping an octave. "I am asking you, as family, to treat my father with respect." "You assault my staff!" Petunia screamed, realizing she was losing control of the narrative. "Call the police! Call the Port Authority! I want him arrested!" "Go ahead,"
I said calmly, releasing the guard who scrambled back, rubbing his arm with fear in his eyes. Call them. My father looked at me, stunned. He had never seen me move like that. He had never heard this tone in my voice. The Conrad he knew was soft. The man standing before him was something else entirely. Petunia was frantically dialing on her phone. Yes, this is Petunia Dursley. I am on the Gilded Lily. I have a violent intruder. He's attacking guests. Send everyone. She hung up and smirked at me. You're done, Conrad. You're gonna rot in a Monegasque jail. And Thomas, if you don't sign that paper by the time the police get here, I'm calling the nursing home and telling them to put Rose's bed on the curb tonight. The cruelty was bottomless. My father's hand hovered over the paper again. Please, Conrad, he sobbed. Just go! Run! I'll handle this. No, Dad. I reached into my pocket, not for a weapon, but for a phone, a satellite phone, old and battered. I dialed a single number.
Identity, a voice on the other end answered instantly. Sierra 70, Kerrigan. Authentication code Zulu X-ray November. Verified, Commander. What do you need? I have a code blue situation regarding a dependent of a Medal of Honor recipient. Immediate legal and financial intervention required. Location, Monaco Harbor, Slip 42. Hostile entity is threatening eviction of a dependent. Understood, Commander. Admiral Vance is actually in the harbor on the USS Mount Whitney for the summit, patching him through. The crowd watched, confused. Petunia laughed. Who are you calling? Your imaginary friends? I ignored her. Admiral, I said into the phone, Conrad here. I need a favor, and I need a ride for my father. Minutes passed in tense silence. Petunia mocked us, sipping her champagne, convinced I was bluffing. My father stood frozen, the pen still in his hand, looking between me and his sister-in-law. Then the sound came. Not the sirens of police cars, but the deep, thrumming roar of heavy engines. A sleek, gray tender boat, flying the U.S. Navy flag, cut through the harbor waters, flanking the super yacht. But it wasn't just the Navy. A second boat, bearing the insignia of the Monaco Royal Police, pulled up alongside it. Finally, Petunia shouted, arrest him! The police boarded, but they didn't draw weapons. They stood at attention. Then, a man in a pristine white uniform boarded. He had 3 stars on his shoulder. Admiral Vance. He was followed by 2 MPs and a lawyer in a sharp suit. Petunia bustled forward. Admiral, thank goodness. This hooligan is disturbing the peace. Take him away. Admiral Vance walked past her as if she were a deck chair. He walked straight to me. The hush that fell over the yacht was total. The Admiral stopped 3 feet from me, snapped his heels together, and rendered a sharp, slow salute. Commander Kerrigan, the Admiral said, his voice booming across the quiet deck. It's been a long time. The President sends his regards. I returned the salute slowly, my drifter persona evaporating. I stood to my full height, my posture perfect. Admiral, thank you for coming on short notice. My father dropped the pen. It clattered loudly on the deck. Petunia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Commander? What? He's unemployed. He's a bum. The Admiral turned to her slowly, his expression one of icy disdain. Ma'am, the man you are addressing is a recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor. He is a Tier 1 operator who has spent the last 10 years conducting operations that allow people like you to sleep at night. He is not unemployed, he is classified. Gasps erupted from the guests. Phones were raised, recording. My father stared at me, his eyes wide, processing the last decade of my absence in a single second. Conrad? He whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, Dad, I said softly, turning to him. But I'm not a drifter, and I'm not broke. I nodded to the lawyer who had come aboard. The lawyer stepped forward, opening a briefcase. Mrs. Dursley, he said, handing Petunia a document. This is a subpoena regarding the embezzlement of the Employee Pension Fund.
And this, he handed a second paper to my father, is a confirmation of transfer. Commander Kerrigan has purchased the care facility where his grandmother resides. He bought the building 10 minutes ago. He what? Petunia stammered, pale under her makeup. I've been saving my deployment pay for a long time, Dad, and I've had some good investment advice from friends in high places. Grandma owns the building now. You don't have to pay a dime. The shift in power was physical. The guests who had been sneering at us moments ago began to back away from Petunia. She looked around, realizing her social capital had evaporated instantly. She wasn't just the villain, she was the fool who had tried to blackmail a national hero. Thomas? She tried, her voice trembling. Thomas, surely we can talk about this. We're family. My father looked at the contract on the floor, then at me, his son, the quiet professional who had endured insults to save his dignity. He picked up the contract, he ripped it in half, then he ripped it again.
We were family, Petunia, Thomas said, his voice finding a strength I hadn't heard in years. But family doesn't hold grandmothers hostage. I'm retiring, effective immediately, and I'll be taking my full pension. If it's missing, my son's lawyer will be in touch. We have a forensic accounting team standing by to audit the firm's books, the Admiral added pleasantly, just to ensure the commander's family assets are secure. Petunia slumped against the railing, defeated. The party was over. The guests were already whispering, distancing themselves from the coming scandal. Come on, Dad, I said, offering him my arm. The Admiral has offered us a lift back to shore, and I think there's a steak dinner with our names on it. My treat. But your bag, Dad said, pointing to my battered duffel. Leave it, I smiled. I don't need the disguise anymore. We walked down the gangway, not as the poor relations being kicked out, but as the guests of honor escorted by the United States Navy. The Admiral walked beside us. As we stepped onto the Navy tender, I looked back one last time. Petunia was alone on the stage, the spotlight highlighting her isolation. As the boat pulled away, cutting through the turquoise water, my father looked at me. He reached out and touched the side of my face. "A Medal of Honor?" he asked, tears welling up again. "Why didn't you say?" "Because I wanted you to be proud of me for being your son, not for the medals," I said honestly. "And because the work requires silence." He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my shoulder. "I've always been proud of you, Conrad. Always. Even when I thought you were sleeping under a bridge." I hugged him back, looking at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and purple. The mask was off. The mission was accomplished. And for the first time in 10 years, I was truly home.